This is the Rebel Scum podcast. Available in video on YouTube and audio wherever you listen to your podcasts. Every week, Brock and James talk the latest rumors, news, and theories from a galaxy far, far away. Support us on Patreon for exclusive offers and join the Star Wars discussion. Patreon.com/Rebel Scum podcast. Here are your hosts, Brock and James.
You are always scum. Rebel scum.
How did your panel turn out today?
I thought the panel was great. It was really a good group of people with good questions, and always happy to meet fans of the work.
So, Rebel Scum podcast, we talk about everything Star Wars, especially from the original trilogy, and we talk about the Christmas special all the time. My co-host James and I, we both talk about droids and Ewoks on a regular basis. So, first of all, Faithful Wookiee is an interesting cartoon short. It's beautiful. My first question, and I'm sure you fielded this a million times, what was it like collaborating with Lucasfilm that early on in the history of Star Wars?
It was fantastic. So, my book, Animation Nation, begins with the story of flying out to San Francisco to meet with George to land the show. And that itself was a trip because Lucasfilm was operating in Marin County. And this was 1978. We were in the middle of producing a show called The Devil and Daniel Mouse. So we were really busy, but the opportunity to work with Lucas meant we were prepared to figure out how to do more than the studio had ever done. And we had a very short timeline from George. George had seen our short called A Cosmic Christmas, which was on American TV at the time. And that's what caused him to think about using us to do The Faithful Wookiee. And The Faithful Wookiee was an exciting project because it was the only part of the 2-hour special that George himself was very engaged in, right? And he got to choose the company that did it and was happy with that. And so when I flew out to meet him, I knew that this was a huge leap for our company because we had just produced our first half-hour special, and he was the successful director-producer of American Graffiti as well as Star Wars. And so, I was meeting a hero, and that's always exciting. And one of the things about George was he really knew what he wanted. He didn't sort of overwork things. He would look at a storyboard for this 10-minute cartoon, and after seeing it once, would identify the 2 changes he wanted. Interestingly, when we went over the board with him, we told him that we thought because the short was going to be in the 2-hour holiday special, that we needed a little introduction, because originally it was going to begin without that sort of Star Trek homage that begins the short. And so he then went into another room and quickly wrote the narration. And that was great because the short had been written by Joe Johnson, who's, he later became a director himself, was a great designer. And, what's great too is that having worked with George on this, he became a mentor while we were doing our first animated feature, Rock and Rule. And then when it came time to do his first series, Ewoks and Droids, he remembered us and came back to us. So we felt really great about the relationship. And our studio really got plussed working with George's sound people, George's designers, George's production talent group. And so I think Nelvana grew in leaps and bounds because of that engagement.
Now, the Christmas special is one of the most infamous Star Wars properties. It's after the fact, in your cartoon, the short is in there, and it's the introduction of Boba Fett, one of the most popular characters, right? Almost immediately after Empire Strikes Back, and now we have Book of Boba Fett. We see him live action. He's talking. After the Christmas special came out and became what it did you ever expect something like that to be so infamous? And did it ever has like Faithful Wookiee is a separate thing, but like how did the reception of the Christmas special hit you?
So we were disappointed with the original reception because there was huge disappointment by the variety show. But we knew that people liked the cartoon, and George really liked the cartoon. And the fact that it later became famous for introducing Boba Fett was interesting because when my first meeting with George, which happened at his house, at the end of the meeting, he said, "And you're going to get to introduce Boba Fett." And that's when I knew we had landed the show. And of course, nobody knew who Boba Fett was at that point. He had not yet appeared in the Star Wars universe, but he existed in George's mind and Joe Johnston's mind. And then, one of the interesting things too is that the only design that existed for Boba Fett's costume that we were given was 16 millimeter black and white footage of an actor walking around in the costume because he had just been created. And so we had to design him from that film footage.
Well, I like the Christmas special. I like Faithful Wookiee, but really what I'm a fan of is Ewoks. As you can see, I got my shirt on. Ewoks and droids. That show, like for a long time, I thought I was the only one that ever watched it because it was like I never talked about any of that with my friends because, back in the day, it's like unless it was hugely popular, you didn't talk about it. Obviously, you had a great relation with George Lucas. What created that desire for those two shows to exist, Droids and Ewoks?
So George had finished with the first trilogy, and I think he was not sure what his plan was for the next group of films yet. And he wanted to keep the toy line alive. And so he had this idea of doing a show featuring R2-D2 and C-3PO. He described them as the Laurel and Hardy of the Star Wars universe. And he thought that would be fun. And this was the beginning of home video. And so he wanted to create 4 episode arcs for droids where he would sell like a droids movie consisting of 4 of the episodes pre-cut. Stuart Copeland from the Police, the music group The Police, did the music, score, and the song. And the idea was we couldn't use the other Star Wars characters because George was not sure what his plan was for them exactly, right? He was working that out. So we had to create new characters, etc., which is why every 4 episodes there were new heroes and villains, etc. One of the things that's exciting about droids is how funny R2-D2 and C-3PO are and how they make great comic foils for the story.
So I grew up in Canada. Obviously, Fan Expo is my convention that I come to every year. I grew up with Nelvana cartoons and like Babar, as you see on your lapel there, Little Bear, Franklin, Care Bears, Beetlejuice. Like it's just never ending. Like I love looking at your IMDb and seeing all the projects you've worked on. Now a lot of that is geared towards children. When you got into storytelling and animation, was that always the goal for talking to the youth and trying to educate the youth, or did that just sort of come about organically?
Well, it was the natural home for animation, but over time we always wanted to stretch that audience. And so we were always pushing the envelope on how to do that. And so animation became even more exciting when Simpsons broke out, right? But doing the Star Wars property really also was one of the things that helped, and doing Beetlejuice, because while both of those were for kids, they were for everybody.
Now you have your book here, Animation Nation. Obviously, can you give us a synopsis of what the book is about?
Yeah, so the book basically starts with us getting the Star Wars project for Faithful Wookiee. It goes back and I talk about my childhood and my growth as a person. I started as an experimental filmmaker and eventually grew the idea of starting an animation company with friends and started Nelvana. And interestingly, Nelvana came from a great Canadian comic book from World War II called Nelvana of the Northern Lights. And we were a patriotic company here in Toronto building the animation industry, which did not exist, and eventually spreading it around the world. So we really had this global sense of animation and working around the world. Ewoks, we didn't talk about Ewoks. So one of the fun stories about Ewoks was we had Taj Mahal, the music artist, doing the opening title for the first season of Ewoks, and he had delivered a rough that was really rough. And he has a very gravelly voice. The network was begging Lucasfilm to sweeten it. And so we eventually, I went to Hawaii where Taj Mahal had his studio where he lived. It was just an 8-track studio to do the final recording and the sweetening of the track. And Taj didn't show up. And so basically, I was meeting with the engineer and said, well, look, we got to sweeten this. What do we do? Is there anybody around who can sing on this? And he said, well, if you go to the local hotel, there'll be some Hawaiian, singers who sing in that Hawaiian style, and, see if they'll come back and do it. So I went there with my Lucasfilm producer, Mickey Herman, and we brought back a couple of singers, and we were recording them, and Taj walked in, nonchalant, liked what he was hearing, and then he re-recorded his version, his vocal. And we ended up with that final track. But it's a unique sort of theme song for a show. And Ewoks was a lot of fun because while Droids was aimed at boys, Ewoks was a little more aimed at girls, because properties in those days were either boy properties or girl properties. That's changed over time. But in those days, it still was very segmented.
So the book sounds like it's full of like behind the scenes stories from your life. Is there anything you think that readers will take away about animation, about life, once they read this book?
Yes. So I've always encouraged people who are interested in animation to do it. And today, because of the strength of YouTube and the strength of TikTok and other social networks, you can make shorts, put them on YouTube. There's no curator. You can build an audience and have an audience that builds up to the point where you can then go mainstream with your property. And I've done that with a few properties, being Puppy Cat and Bravest Warriors, both of which I did at Frederator while running WoW Unlimited Media, which was a company I started after Nelvana and was the last company that I ran.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's truly an honor to meet a legend yourself. That story about the theme song to Ewoks, like that lives rent free. That song lives rent free in my head. So like it's really cool to hear the origins of it.
Great. All right, thank you so much for a great interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.